dreamer, but my heart's of gold. I had a runaway.
Today, we're looking at two very different, but surprisingly connected stories in the longevity world. One is about a telehealth company, AgelessRx, landing a $1 million milestone award in the XPRIZE Healthspan competition. The other is about L'Oreal teaming up with the National University of Singapore to see if skin, scalp, and hair can help measure biological aging. And we'll end with a quick reality check. Even if we can extend health span, how do people actually pay for aging in the real world?
It's a great lineup because it hits the full pipeline, getting therapies to people, figuring out how to measure whether they're working, and then dealing with the money side of aging. Let's start with AgelessRx, because the headline sounds simple. They got $1 million. But the why really matters.
Right. The XPRIZE Healthspan isn't a normal grant. It's a huge competition, more than $100 million total, and the goal is pretty ambitious. Restore functions that typically decline with age, like muscle strength, cognition, and immune function. Not slow the decline, but restore it with targets like 10 years of regained function and even an aspirational 20, delivered within a year or less of treatment.
And this milestone round AgelessRx won. They weren't the only ones. They were picked as one of 10 teams out of hundreds of pre-registered groups globally. So the $1 million is real, but it's also a ticket to keep going toward the final phase.
What's interesting is that AgelessRx isn't coming in with one shiny new molecule that nobody's ever heard of. Their bigger innovation is the delivery model, telehealth, direct-to-consumer access, plus clinical protocols that try to look like serious research, not wellness marketing.
That's the key. A lot of longevity research happens inside academic medical centers, with recruitment limited to whoever lives nearby and can participate. Then results show up years later in journals most people don't read. AgelessRx basically says, what if we bring structured longevity care to a broader population now and run trials through that same kind of access?
And they already have scale. They've built a platform with a large membership base, which matters if you're trying to run pragmatic trials or make care delivery less elitist.
Let's talk about what they're actually doing clinically, because people will hear a list of compounds and immediately ask, is this a kitchen sink?
They do stack therapies. Their platform includes prescription approaches that are already familiar in longevity circles: metformin, different NAD plus related formulations, low-dose naltrexone, glutathione, GLP-1 receptor agonists, and then some emerging choices like methylene blue. The idea is to target multiple hallmarks of aging: metabolism, cellular senescence, mitochondrial function, inflammation, things like that.
That stacking concept shows up clearly in their qualifying pilot study. This was a 90-day randomized, placebo-controlled pilot. Small group, a couple dozen older adults, with fewer completing the final analysis. So nobody should pretend it's a definitive proof.
But the design tells you how they think. They didn't bet everything on one intervention. They had a placebo group and 2 active arms, and those active arms tried combinations that can include low-dose naltrexone, metformin, NAD+, vitamin B12, low-dose rapamycin, glutathione, plus a proprietary supplement, all on top of structured exercise and guided meditation.
Which is exactly where the debate starts. Some people hear exercise and meditation and say, okay, so how do we know what the drugs did? Others will say, that's the point. Aging isn't one pathway. Trying to isolate one magic pill might be missing the biology.
And that tension is everywhere in longevity: purity of mechanism versus real-world effectiveness. If your goal is to improve function in a population, a multi-pronged intervention might be the honest approach. But if your goal is to cleanly attribute causality, combos can be messy.
Now for the next step. Their future plan for the competition's final stage is a much larger, fully powered randomized controlled trial. Roughly 186 adults, ages 50 to 90, 1-year duration. Active arm versus placebo. That's a very different level of evidence than a 90-day pilot.
And it's not just them operating alone. The competition has shared infrastructure, data coordination run through a centralized center at a university, and shared lab and biomarker coordination through another research institute. The point is standardization, comparable biomarkers, consistent sample storage, shared protocols where it makes sense, so the final results aren't 10 totally incompatible experiments.
Which brings us to the bigger context. Longevity as an industry is booming, with projections of an enormous longevity economy over the next several years. But the reason it's booming isn't just consumer interest. It's also the cost pressure. Age-related disease eats a massive share of global healthcare spending.
Exactly. If society is spending the majority of healthcare dollars on conditions strongly tied to aging, then prevention and function restoration aren't just personal goals. They're economic goals. That's why the AgelessRx angle of scale matters. A therapy that's elegant but inaccessible doesn't move population health.
The CEO framing is basically, we've treated aging like fate. But maybe it's measurable and modifiable. Whether you agree or not, it's a powerful message because it implies accountability. If we can measure aging, then we can test interventions like we test anything else.
Which is a perfect bridge to our second story. Because how do you measure aging, really? Not just birthdays, but biology.
Enter skin. L'Oreal and the National University of Singapore are collaborating to build a joint lab that integrates skin, scalp, and hair assessments into broader longevity trials. The premise sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly undertested. Do different organs age at the same rate?
And if they don't, then skin might be telling you something unique. Or it might be telling you almost nothing about what's happening in your arteries, your muscles, or your brain. That's what they want to validate.
I like that they're doing within-person comparisons. That's a big deal. Instead of comparing a dermatology cohort to a separate aging cohort, and hoping the results line up, they're measuring skin and hair alongside cardiovascular, metabolic, cognitive, and musculoskeletal markers in the same participants.
And skin is incredibly practical as a measurement target. It's visible, it can be imaged repeatedly, it can sometimes be sampled with less hassle than other tissues. If skin markers correlate with systemic aging, you could get a cheaper, repeatable window into what's happening inside the body.
But there's also a big caution here. Just because something is easy to measure doesn't mean it's a valid proxy. And even if it's a good biomarker, that doesn't automatically make it a therapeutic target.
Right. A thermometer is useful, but you don't treat the thermometer. The ambition here is to see whether skin biology reflects aging pathways like DNA damage responses, protein dysfunction, mitochondrial decline, chronic low-grade inflammation. Those signals can exist before obvious wrinkles, which is fascinating. The biology may shift before the mirror tells you anything.
And this also marks a cultural shift in the beauty industry. Historically, the focus was, how do we make aging less visible? Now the question is inching toward, can we understand the mechanisms and prevent damage earlier? If skin becomes an early warning system, that changes what skincare and haircare even mean.
Singapore is also a notable setting. It's aging quickly, and it's positioning itself as a hub for longevity research. So this isn't just a corporate R&D project in isolation. It's embedded in a clinical trial environment meant to produce serious data over time. Now, before we wrap, let's do that reality check you mentioned. Because longevity science can race ahead, but people's lives are still shaped by housing costs, retirement timing, caregiving, and divorce. Home equity and reverse mortgages are being used to manage later life transitions. We're seeing more older couples divorcing than in past decades, and that can force big decisions about the family home. Some people are using reverse mortgages or newer equity products to fund buyouts so one spouse can stay. Moving far, but some are relocating for affordability, to be near family, or to reshape retirement. Costs to separate can be relieved and thus eliminating some barriers for 55-plus communities, but medication costs, diagnostics, and long-term monitoring still compete with housing payments and fixed incomes. Life has its ups and downs. But you're not alone. From 10 to 110, we're in this together right here, right now. Please subscribe at IamHealthyMoney.com and visit us at Q&A with Kim and Ray on YouTube. It would mean so much more than you know. I will continue to bring you fascinating subjects with all the research so you don't have to do it all alone. We will learn together. And then wait until the end of each video for a sneak peek into the next research project.